Hello, my name is Chad Saccone. I am a comic book artist, and this is an iPad Pro. The reason I'm making this video is because I've seen a lot of posts on Twitter and people questioning whether the iPad Pro can be used as effectively as a Cintiq companion or a Surface Pro for the production of comic book art. I've had this device for about 2 weeks now, and my conclusion is that it can be. You have to be clever about how you use the various art applications and use them in conjunction with one another to take advantage of the best tools in each of 5 different apps. And you also have to really want to use this because getting files in and out is more convoluted than it is on a Surface Pro or a Cintiq Companion, for example, because those are full Windows machines that have access to a file menu. Uh, you are restricted in the iOS operating system from being able to directly access your file menu. So you have to uh, pull the files in and out of various different apps in a different way. Essentially, whether any artist would want to use this as opposed to a Cintiq or the Surface Pro is really based on how much you like the stylus or the iPad form factor in comparison to the Cintiq. Personally, I like the Apple Pencil as an input device better than the Wacom uh, Cintiq tablet styluses, and I really prefer the iPad form factor over the Cintiq Companion, which I had been using. The iPad is about half the weight. The screen is more vibrant. It's a more attractive screen, easier to look at for extended periods of time, in my opinion. And you're also tied into the Apple customer support system and the Apple environment, which frankly is probably better customer support than Wacom is, as far as I'm concerned. That's one person's opinion. But it is more of a hassle to get files in and out, and you do have to be clever how you use the applications. So you have to want to do it in order to do it. So let me give a quick explanation of the 5 apps that I use to produce comic book art. And those are Procreate, Metabang Paint, Adobe Sketch, Graphic, and an app called Art Studio. And each of these apps has pluses and minuses, strengths and weaknesses, and they can be used in conjunction with one another. First of all, Procreate. Um, this app, a lot of the artists I've seen talking on Twitter like the sketching in this app and indicate they think it's the best for sketching. I actually don't like the pressure curve on this app as much as I do on Adobe Sketch or Metabang Paint. But uh, what this app has that none of the other apps do is a very robust set of brushes, a lot of different brush sets, a lot of really nice brushes. You can use charcoals, pencils, inks, um, and the ability to download brushes. There's a lot of brushes available for download, and you can access them through the Procreate forums. So you can get a really big brush set, a lot of different brushes here that are very nice. And it also has a perspective tool that's very similar to the ones you would see in Manga Studio for a Windows or a Mac machine, and very useful. You can set it up uh, in this menu, turn it on, and you can edit the perspective guide, and you can set 1, 2, or 3 points of perspective. And then in the layer menu, you can turn on perspective assist, and then all your lines will snap to the perspective. So this is very helpful. That's one of the features I found very helpful in Manga Studio. And the Procreate app is the app on the iOS system that I've found has the best perspective guide. Now, uh, I don't produce my finished comic pages in Procreate, but if I want to do a panel in perspective, I can do that in Procreate and then simply save that to the camera roll and import that as a layer into one of the other programs that I'll talk about in a minute. But the big pluses for Procreate are, first, you can manipulate the canvas like this, turn it just with your fingers. The palm rejection is very good. Uh, The sketching, a lot of artists like it. Like I said, I don't like the pressure curve. The inking, I haven't found is very good on Procreate, but the brush set is nice if you want a lot of these special brushes to use for effects, and the perspective grid tool is very nice on Procreate. So I do use it for those things. Metabong Paint. This is the program I use to produce my finished, I have been using to produce my finished comic pages. Now, unlike Procreate, you can't twist, but it does have, if you have the hand on, you can manipulate your canvas, and you can, as you can see, you can get pretty crisp inking. This is roughly equivalent. I mean, whether you like the style or not is a matter of taste, but this is my inking style, and this is roughly equivalent to the output I can get from a Cintiq. So you can use this for producing crisp comic type inks and colors. The Metabong Paint program has a very robust system of layers. You can change the opacity pretty easily on these. You can change the blending mode. There's a bunch of different blending modes here for all the layers, just as you would see in Photoshop or Manga Studio. Metabong Paint does have a set of brushes. It's not as big as a selection as the Procreate, and the brushes aren't quite as nice as Procreate, but there are good standard inking brushes you can use, and you can control the number of aspects, size, opacity, and some other things. And you can also there is palm rejection. You have to turn it on in the Metabang program, which isn't as nice as Procreate, where it's always on. If you don't have this turned on, you get some artifacts from your palm. It'll still work, but you get some dots on the side of the page from your palm that that you'll have to either erase. When you turn this on, then you can't manipulate the canvas. So you have to either hit the hand in order to manipulate the canvas when palm rejection is on, or turn it off. Now you can get used to that. That's not a debilitating problem. You can also do coloring, comic book style coloring on this device, on the Metabang app. A lot of layers, as you can see. This is my pretty primitive coloring style, just basic cell shading, but you can do, you know, shades, highlights, set the blending modes, overlays, color overlays. This program also has a very good magic wand that you can configure for anti-aliasing or expanding the pixels. It has a good selection tool that you can select rectangle, ellipse, or your standard, you know, just draw your selection, and then you can manipulate the selections. You can expand, you can contract, you can draw a selection border, which is essentially a stroke function, and control the line width. So this is a pretty full-featured, full-functioning art program that replicates a good percentage of what you can do on Manga Studio or Photoshop, and I have found useful to produce pretty equivalent comic output to what I can get from the Cintiq. This program can export to Dropbox, which is helpful because in order to do this, you're going to have to use the cloud as you would your file system. Since you don't have direct access in IOX to the file system, you have to use the cloud. So you want to output that as a JPEG, you can export to Dropbox. So that's a good function here. The problem is I can't find a way to import from Dropbox on this, so that requires me to use a different program. There is a program called Graphic, which is a vector drawing program. I don't really use it for drawing, but the one advantage it has for me is it'll import from Dropbox, and it'll import PSD, JPEGs, TIFFs, or PNG files from the Dropbox, and it'll keep the layers intact. So you can import a PSD file from Dropbox. This is the only program I've found that'll import a PSD file and read it correctly. So if you have something you've worked on in Photoshop and it's sitting out on Dropbox, you can bring it in to this program, and then you can save it out to the camera roll, or save it as another file format that's usable by one of the other programs here. So I use this program to bring things in from Dropbox if they're in PSD form. That's really all I use Graphic for, because I don't do a lot of vector stuff. The only other app I use is called Art Studio. Well, I didn't talk about Adobe Sketch. I'll show that in a moment. But Art Studio is an app. The drawing is not as good as Procreate. The inking is not as good as Metabang, because this doesn't, at least on the inking, doesn't have very good pressure sensitivity for the Apple Pencil. However, this does have good kind of file manipulation in terms of canvas size changes, resizes, and things like a couple of commands that this program has that some of the others don't have, that would be within Manga Studio, or things you could use. So sometimes I need to bring a file into this program, and if I need to resize the canvas or resize the image directly, and you can export this out to the camera roll and bring it into other programs. So this Art Studio is useful for a couple of commands. Adobe Sketch is the program that I find has the best just kind of sketchbook pencil response. Most of you have probably seen this application, but it has very good pressure sensitivity in terms of getting a very thin pencil line versus a thick line. You can control the flow and the color of your line, and you can do your sketching in this app pretty well. And then it's pretty easy to just export this to the camera roll. You just save your image, and then you can, I'll just do a demo here. Just export this to the camera roll, and then for Metabang, you could import it from the camera roll, and there you have the image from Adobe Sketch into this. Or you could also, if you wanted to just bring it in as a layer in an existing drawing, you could just select an image and take it from the camera roll there. So the bottom line is, after 2 weeks of using the iPad to try to generate the output that I was doing on a Cintiq, because I prefer the iPad form factor and this Apple Pencil, I have found that it can be done using primarily the Metabang Paint app, but in conjunction with these 4 other apps, Procreate, Adobe Sketch, Graphic, and Art Studio, I've been able to replicate essentially everything that I did in Manga Studio using the iPad Pro. Whether you want to do this as a comic book artist or not will basically be based on how much you like the iPad as a device, and how much, if at all, you prefer the iPad's form factor and the Apple Pencil stylus over the Cintiq. If you don't really like this better and want to use this and an iPad, you're probably better off sticking with the Cintiq. But I just wanted to make it clear that, at least from my experiments and using multiple apps, you can replicate both sketching, finished inked comic artwork, as well as colored comic artwork using an iPad Pro.